The Baltimore Ravens may have finally fixed the biggest issue that has caused them to not win a Super Bowl under Lamar Jackson. Now, I'm not talking about getting better wide receivers. I'm not talking about, helping out the offense. I'm not even talking about play calling. What I'm talking about is defense specific and can compare to how the Eagles were able to win their Super Bowl last season. So let's talk about it. Now, if you've been watching the Baltimore Ravens for the last 5-6 years, and or even farther, right? You recognize one thing. The Ravens defense appears to be pretty good in the regular season, right? Now, whether or not they're the best defense in the regular season is completely arguable. There's different seasons, stuff like that. But they get to the playoffs and they struggle. They struggle a lot against teams like the Chiefs, against teams like the Titans, against teams like the Bills. They really, really struggle. And a lot of Ravens fans and casual fans might look at that and be like, wow, the Ravens defense, I guess it's just a little bit overrated. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. I just think that the defense is built for specific situations, right? When you look at how they are built, they play the same way against every single team, and it works really well when you don't have an elite quarterback. But as soon as the Ravens have to face off against like a high-end quarterback, right? Whether it's Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, the Ravens defense gets tossed. Like we saw the games against the Bengals last year, right? They were shootouts every single time. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, they were just going crazy. But then you watch the Ravens defense play against teams without elite quarterbacks, and you're like, dude, this defense is insane. Like they're so good. And the reason for that is turnovers. The Baltimore Ravens defense under Lamar Jackson has not been a very good turnover forcing defense. Now, 2019, they were pretty solid. Marlon Humphrey had like a crazy year. But overall, like the Ravens defense has struggled to force turnovers. Even when we had Marcus Peters, it was still an issue. Like Marcus Peters was like a huge help for turnovers. But even with Marcus Peters, like he was the only real like big turnover guy that we ever had. Even with him, like we still weren't like necessarily great at forcing turnovers. And that's where when we play against Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, why they're able to cook us up is because we play pretty stock defense, right? We're trying to get 3 and outs, we're trying to get sacks. But that's not going to work against those guys, right? They're too good in the pocket. You need to be able to take advantage of their mistakes because their mistakes aren't drive ending when it plays against the Ravens, right? But when you look at the Bengals when they play the Chiefs, right? How are they able to win? It's like, well, in the playoffs, when they beat them in the AFC Championship game, Patrick Mahomes got the ball in overtime, was the first person to touch the ball, threw an interception. I believe it was Jesse Bates got the interception down the field, right? They made him pay for his mistake. The Ravens had the worst ball skill cornerback in the NFL last year, I believe, Brandon Stevens. I called him BS ball skills because he ain't got them. But he was one of the most targeted players in the NFL. He might have been the most targeted player in the NFL last year, and he couldn't get any turnovers. That was a huge problem because we need stops. We need momentum changing plays, and we just haven't gotten that. And when you look at how the Eagles were able to win, they forced, I want to say, 13 turnovers in their playoff run. The Ravens haven't forced a playoff turnover, and I want to get the year right, but it's like 3 years. It might be 4 years now since the Ravens have forced a playoff turnover. You're never going to win the Super Bowl if you can't force a playoff turnover. Never. It's never going to happen. So why do I think that this has changed? Why do I think the Ravens have fixed this issue? One, they got rid of Brandon Stevens. That's a huge, huge change. But two, they brought in Jaire Alexander. Jaire Alexander, for people that don't know, is one of the best cornerbacks in the NFL when healthy. You have to give that caveat with him because he's only played in 7 games each of the last 2 seasons. But when healthy, his last full year healthy, 5 interceptions, and was a Pro Bowler. Marlon Humphrey last year took a massive leap in terms of turning the ball over. 6 interceptions for him, by far a career best. Then you look at our other corner, Nate Wiggins, someone who can absolutely intercept the ball, someone who made a lot of breaks on the ball, but he was a rookie last year, right? He did get an interception. He did get his pick 6, but you'd expect him to get even better with his ball skills. Expect him to get even more interceptions. Not saying he's getting 5, not saying he's getting 6, right? But like, if he can get 2, which he definitely had opportunities to get 2 last year. He probably should have had 2 last year. But he absolutely can do that. Kyle Hamilton, he's a good turnover guy. He's forced plenty of turnovers, had some diving interceptions. He's had the tipped interceptions. Like, he can absolutely get you a turnover. But then obviously we go out and we draft Malaki Starks. Malaki Starks, known ball hawk really from day one when he stepped in at Georgia. Not necessarily like the most interceptions. He just wasn't a hugely targeted player in college football. But in his first game, he had one of the craziest interceptions of college football that season. Against, I believe it was the Ducks, and then he had another one this year in the debut game against the Clemson Tigers. He went out and had another just crazy sideline interception. Those are the types of plays that the Ravens defense needs, right? The plays that can change a game, not the plays, because if you look back and you say, oh, what Ravens players had the most interceptions in a season in the last probably ever, maybe tying Ed Reed, maybe it was a little worse than Ed Reed. I think Ed Reed had more than 7, but 7 interceptions was done by Geno Stone. I said it during the year. I said it throughout the entire season. I said it after the year when it was contract talks. Geno Stone's interceptions weren't groundbreaking. He had maybe 1 interception where it was like, that was a really good play. Almost all of them were just like extreme overthrows or underthrows or missed throws that he was able to take advantage of. Now, you have to give him credit. He took advantage of them. He did his job with the ball in the air, but it wasn't like he was seeking out those interceptions. Marlon, when he gets picks, he seeks them out. Kyle seeks them out. Jaire seeks them out. Nate Wiggins jumped it out. That's how he got his. He seeks him out. Malaki Starks makes brilliant plays, or at least he did in college, to get his interceptions. Those are the types of plays I'm talking about, right? Because when you're playing Joe Burrow, when you're playing Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, it's not that you can't really just be like, well, if the quarterback sails his slant route, we can get a safety interception, right? No, that'll happen against a rookie quarterback, a second-year quarterback, a bad quarterback. But that's not going to happen against the top-tier guys. But the Ravens now have players at every position in the secondary that can absolutely make a play on the football. That's step 1. Step 2 comes with the pass rush. The other aspect of getting turnovers is pass rush. You have to get strip sacks. That's the easiest way to get a turnover, I think, in the NFL is a strip sack, just because anytime you get a sack, teams can get up to 50 sacks in a season. If you're able to just poke that ball out, it gives you a really good opportunity. But not only that is when you don't get the strip sack, right? You still get either a sack or a forced fumble that you don't recover. So it's still a great play. Whereas when you sell out for an interception, yeah, it might just be a dropped pick, which is still a good incompletion. It's not as good as a sack. But you might just miss the ball and then they score a touchdown. So there's definite negatives with that. The Ravens pass rush is essentially the same as it was last year, where they ranked, I want to say it was 14th in sacks. They had, or in forced fumbles last year, which is not great. Or they had 14. They might have been, I think they're ranked at 20th, but there was 7 people tied for 20. So I think it might be 14th. But they have basically the same guys, but they're adding Mike Green. They're getting another year of Adafe away, who had made a massive jump last year, right? 10 sack guy. Can he get to 12? Right? That's a reasonable question for his improvement, right? I always said year 4, year 5, that's going to be the big deal for him. Year 4 was great. Let's see if he can do it again in year 5. David Ojabo, right? Potentially a fully healthy season. And then guys like Adisa Isaac, guys like Tavius Robinson, guys that, Tavius Robinson played really well actually in the playoff game against the Bills. But then Adisa Isaac just didn't get a lot of opportunity. He dealt with some injuries last year. We have a plethora of pass rushers. Obviously, Matabike, year 2 of his massive contract. Travis Jones looked really good towards the end of the year. The Ravens should force more turnovers. That is why I think this defense is different. That is why I think this defense could be a key factor in winning the Super Bowl. Not saying they couldn't have won it in the years past, but it's pretty much impossible to win if you can't force a turnover against a good quarterback. I think they have the players, the personnel to do it this year, and I think they will. Thank you all so much for watching. Subscribe for more. I'm going to be putting out a video tomorrow. I was live on TTB Gaming earlier today, so make sure to check that out if you want to just help out the channel, help me out. You don't even have to like watch the videos, but if you just want to subscribe, that would definitely help. Thank you so much, and I'll see all of you again tomorrow.